Hello, thanks for joining. I'm Brent White,
And I'm Tim Roberts.
and today we're going to go over some common methods that we use to obtain access to buildings.
Who are these guys? Well, like I said, I'm Tim Roberts. I work with Dark Wolf Solutions. You can find me on Twitter as Zanchin Hacks, a Twitter handle under my name there. Also, wehackpeople.com. That's Brent and I's site. This is a repository of a lot of the talks we've done over the years, our presentations. Also, we do a pretty active blog on there with covert entry and social engineering. Also, some red team tips and tricks.
I'm Brent White. I am a senior security consultant at NTT Security. So, one of the most common misconceptions, especially from the media, is when you hear the word hacker, you automatically think of someone that is going to rob you in the parking lot and steal your baby and all of these things. So, obviously, there are those bad hackers out there, but I want to point out, like Tim and myself, we are good hackers or white hat or ethical hackers, whatever title you want to put on it. The whole point is we do this to find vulnerabilities to report to clients to help them strengthen their overall security posture.
And there's also, I know a lot of people get kind of reserved when they hear penetration assessment or penetration test on my network or against my building or something. It's just to reassure you that this is done to help you. It's not done to ding you. It's not like an audit where we're like, hey, we got you. It is done in collaboration with your security team and just to help you understand kind of where you stand, especially when it comes to real world threats.
So one thing I want to point out is talking about the word unauthorized. So whenever we perform these assessments, I want to be very clear that we were employed or tasked by the client to do these assessments. They are very well of what's going on. We've had all the legal paperwork signed, and nothing that we are doing is illegal. And we do not condone that you any illegal activity at all. So if you are going to utilize any of these tools or techniques, please make sure that you have the proper authorization.
So what are we going to cover? We're going to cover a few different things. If you've seen any of our talks in the past, we might touch on some similar things, but a lot of this will be focused on covert physical security assessments. So what does that mean? It means that we take on an adversarial role where we attempt to gain access to your facility, data center, sensitive areas. This could include getting access to your systems and things like that, or it could just mean, hey, did you get into the server room and we take a picture of the server or your core switch, or maybe you've put a post-it note on a system that you want us to try to take out of the building or something like that. But its primary focus is to try to bypass physical security access controls, electronic access controls, and then also this often includes social engineering. So doing face-to-face engagements to try to gain access or convince someone to give us access to their system, let us into an area, anything like that.
Yeah, this is basically anything that we can utilize to gain access and get out without people even realizing that an attack happened.
And as a part of this, we do a lot of reconnaissance. So, we'll start off doing like remote reconnaissance, like pre-texting. That's harvesting like OSINT, just open source intelligence. This may even include if it's like a red team kind of approach where you're using multiple attack vectors. It's not just focused on a covert physical security assessment or physical site survey or anything like that. It may include vishing or phishing and those kind of remote social engineering attempts. So there, yeah,
Go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Tim.
No, sorry, no worries. So there are a few different ways we do that. I mentioned some of the OSINT stuff. There's a lot of tricks out there, and Google Dorks I think is probably one of the things that I use the most. There's a lot of tools out there, the Harvester, a bunch of OSINT tools, but utilizing this, you're able to not only try to gather information and enumerate usernames or email addresses or anything like that, but you can also look at Google Street View. Google Street View has come in handy so many times. for identifying badge readers, to seeing where camera placement is, to seeing where points of entry and exit are. Google Street View is amazing. I'll just leave it at that.
It's very handy. So, kind of adding on to that with passive reconnaissance. So, there are ways to find out before you even go what type of wireless technology they are using, webcams, and pretty much anything that might give you an advantage for your guys. If you're looking for current users or usernames, or if you find cameras internally, it might give you an idea of the building's layout. You'll also obtain information such as the culture, the dress, potentially, any information that could be used for where badge cloner, or I'm sorry, badge readers are, what badge reading technology they're using, so you can configure your badge cloner properly. There's a lot of information that could be utilized from this.
Yeah, and then even looking at some of the metadata on these documents that you can able to pull. So let's say you're using some Google Docs to find some PDFs, you pull those down, and then looking at the metadata on it. Oftentimes you'll find things like usernames and such, which is pretty fascinating. Using tools like PwnDB, or there's a lot of other tools out there that'll comb the dark web and see for any kind of previously compromised doxing or any kind of like usernames and passwords that have been kind of released out in the clear. So a lot of people say, well, those passwords that was done like several years ago. That's a good point. However, those usernames probably didn't change. So unless there's a big turnover, that's still pretty handy, even in enumerating usernames.
Yeah, and even maybe to take that to a deeper, even more creepy level, which unfortunately we can use in manipulation for social engineering attacks, is if we find a user that we are targeting and part of their password happens to be the name of a favorite pet or the name of a favorite sports team, for example, now we know a bit more about them and we can attempt to leverage that.
Yeah, and I've even used some phishing campaigns based off of finding some of these passwords and stuff, just to say, hey, so there was a breach and blah blah, and then I'll even tell them that old password, or just to confirm or something. We just want to make sure that you changed your password, and then provide them a password to change it to, explaining, hey, we have just rolled out some a new policy, a new password policy, and we just want to confirm that the complexity requirements are kind of across the board and on an enterprise level. So just to confirm that, could I have you change your password to winter 2020 exclamation point? And that has worked too many times. It's pretty embarrassing.
So we mentioned Google Dorks. This is just sort of a quick snapshot. We've got this slide, and the next are some pretty common Google Dorks that are very beneficial to us. So if you want to go ahead and go to the next one too. So this helps when you're looking. We mentioned network cameras. With these Google Dorks, it helps to sort of pin those things down a bit. There are also web services out there such as Shodan, where you can look for IoT connected devices or get a better footprint of something that might be connected for your target. There's a lot of resources, exploitdb.com. Also, Johnny Long, he's written several books regarding this. And luckily, there are also tools that help to automate these Google Dork searches.
So something we see a lot of is people will post pictures online, like they're excited about a new job, or maybe it's just kind of on accident when they take a picture and their keys are laying on a desk, or they're attached to the lanyard that's got their badge. It's bad enough that you're posting a picture of your badge, your employee badge online, or sometimes I'll see marketing photos, especially corporate events or something, or everybody's standing side by side smiling, and they're talking about employee culture is this, or they're playing some foosball or something like that, and they've got their lanyard around their neck. Then you see both a key and what the badge looks like. A lot of people don't know this, but when you look at those keys, you can sometimes we know Brent and I know people that can see a key and guess the bidding on it. So the depth of the teeth on the key is a certain number. And we know people that can just look at that and take a glimpse of it, guess it, and then go home and then type in something and print off that exact key. It's pretty crazy and incredible. But there are applications that will do that same thing.
And you see this a lot too at places that are a bit more secure, where it requires their credentials for a card as well as a physical key. Especially at banks. So banks often will host a lot of things trying to get in new customers, and so they, as Tim mentioned, they'll have the company events where they're all hanging out, and you'll see not only their badge hanging from their neck, but the key there as well. So there's plenty of opportunity for those with malicious intent.
Yeah, and like I was saying, like some of the applications you can get, Snap Decoder is one of them. That's kind of an example, little screenshot of that. And then also, if you're interested in this stuff, our buddies at Red Team Alliance, they do an amazing job of discussing this kind of thing in depth. But yeah, check it out. Check out key bidding.
So these are a few quick examples. We talked about Street View. If you're trying to do some planning and things before you go, which if you've done any of these types of assessments, you will quickly realize that pre-planning is a must. You don't want to just show up day one and not know anything about where you are going. So Street View, you can see that from across the street, the door keying access control system. So if this particular example, this is not from a target. It's just a quick sample that we pulled up to quickly identify that this particular location utilizes door keying. And if you're familiar with any of that, there's a master key floating around. There's also a few other types of attacks that can be performed against that to help yourself gain access as needed.
I mentioned earlier about badges. This was actually something that I pulled off of LinkedIn. One of the marketing directors for this company had posted a few pictures of employees just hanging out, and I was able to just kind of look at that. And I did this right before, just to just show how quickly you can just kind of look at a badge and then make something that kind of looks like it. This I covered it up for obvious reasons, but I just kind of made this more as a joke, but just to show a proof of concept to say, hey, don't do this. Don't post badges. If you're working for HR, if you're working for marketing, and you're doing this, this is very important to be aware that there are hackers out there. And, I know I've heard tales of people that just sit there and they harvest this. They harvest badges off of social media, and they'll have a big, directory of just badges that they found to be able to print off fake badges on the fly.
Same goes for your personal credit cards as well. So there are several tools that can be used for this. And one of the things I want to point out to you, everything that we use, every bypass tool, every script, everything that we use, we make sure it's something that's publicly available. And we do this to drive the point home that this isn't something that just someone with a locksmithing license or some special approved access can do. These are tools that basically anyone can obtain and utilize against these vulnerable targets. This is a picture of a Wi-Fi pineapple that we placed on top of a drone, and it works surprisingly well.
Yeah, and just make sure that you're obeying. Like if you're using a drone in your surveillance, I know a lot of people are kind of doing this. And drone technology is all over the place. But make sure you're obeying drone laws. That your client may not even know that. So if you just show up one time and then you're flying a drone around, You want to make sure that you're looking at the local laws and everything, and not get in trouble for that. So, oh, real quick, a good way to protect against the drone stuff is to tint your windows, on your building in sensitive areas. A lot of people don't do that. So, having blinds or tinted windows or something like that. There are highly secure areas with Faraday cages and things on their roofs to prevent that drones from landing on top of them. But, as far as, some people will fly a drone around your building, especially in off hours where I've seen buildings where they leave the lights on at night, or the cleaning crew leaves the lights on, and then you can just use that drone to fly around, and basically look around and see, and there's high enough definition cameras out there to sometimes pull information, especially if you don't have a proper clean desk policy, or people aren't really adhering to that, and they're leaving sensitive information on their desk or their cubicles, and that's facing the window. You'd be surprised at how much you can utilize something like a drone to do something like that.
Yeah, and in higher security places too, they do have jamming technology or technology that scans for the frequency of common drones as well. So let's go into more active reconnaissance and surveillance. So I want to point out again some really cheap technologies that are available. This is pretty well known. The ink pen camera. It's very cheap, but it's actually pretty useful. One thing I do want to point out is if you are going to utilize something like this, there's a few things to consider. One, you need to understand the laws of recording people against their knowledge. Two, if it's a more secure area, you need to learn how to change the appearance of this technology. People that are skilled in this will quickly spot these types of cheap gadgets. And on the next slide, you'll see too a very cheap video camera inside of a cigarette lighter. I think at the time, I paid $5 or $6 for this on eBay. I don't know if you can still find them there, maybe. Same type of thing. This is a bit more inconspicuous, but again, you need to learn how to change the concealment of these technologies if you are buying them, in mass. It's something else I want to point out. Don't ever use these glass cameras. They're not convincing. They're super thick. You'll be spotted a mile away, and it's the only reason I would suggest that you use it is if you are testing incident response and you're trying to see if people are paying attention and you're trying to be caught, which is something we will do sometimes.
So it's really important that you're blending in. We mentioned before, you can get online and kind of look at pictures from a target location or facility and see, the dress code, or see if there's some construction, even when you're driving by or something like that. Looking to see if there's a busy area. What is the dress code? What is the policy? Is there construction going on in the building? Is there construction going on across the building? There's been a couple different times where when Brent and I had worked together and done these projects where there's been a real busy downtown area, and it's super congested, and a lot of construction workers going in and out. So, dressing up like a construction worker is super handy for doing some surveillance from, let's say, across the street. If it's there at the facility, one of the things that we like to call the covert clipboard, and you'll see it in use in one of these videos here in a little bit. But, that's what I've got in my hand there, and it's a badge cloner. In this picture with Brent on the left, he's actually entering a elevator. That's me behind him taking the picture. And he's got a Boz cloner in that laptop bag. If you're not familiar with that, it's kind of a longer range badge cloner. Really amazing stuff. But Brent's, when you're tight in an elevator with a bunch of people and they've got their badges dangling at their sides, it's pretty easy to clone that badge just from standing in the elevator. You don't have to bump into anybody or anything like that, like Mr. Robot. You can be a significant amount of distance within that elevator and still gather those badges.
And that particular image through our reconnaissance, obviously we figured out the dress code and what was needed to blend in. And when we travel, we have to take quite a few options with us so that we are prepared for most situations. So, on top of blending in, on my very first covert assessment against a hospital, walking around and quickly found out no one paid attention to anything. So, sitting in the waiting room, and I had a very large alpha antenna to do wireless testing, and I figured someone would at least come out and ask me what was going on because it looked very out of place, and no one did. Uh, Adding to that, after walking around the entire facility, very sensitive areas, talking about emergency room areas, I got close enough to where the babies are, uh, but I did not enter that area just because I did not want to take a chance that if I had some sort of illness or something I wasn't aware of, I didn't. It wasn't worth the risk for me to potentially pass that on to them. So after being there for a bit, I started realizing that different people were wearing different kinds of scrubs, and I realized that the sanitation crew they were wearing maroon and so on. And I walked around the corner of a part that I hadn't been to yet, and there was a gift shop there. And this is an actual picture from that gift shop. They were selling all of the scrubs that were being used in that hospital. So it doesn't take a genius to guess what I did next. So
What's funny too is like speaking of gift shops, a while back there was this big convention that I was doing an assessment for, and they sold the lanyards. And then, a lot of times Brent and I will stay at hotels and use their office area, or we'll go to like something like a Kinko's or a print shop or something, if we have to. But to be able to just kind of play arts and crafts and come up with a badge on the fly just because they sell like lanyards and the plastic badge holders or something like that, it's kind of ridiculous. If something just resembles, it doesn't even have to be perfect, because a lot of times people aren't going to sit there and stare at your badge. But we encourage, of course, you to go as much detail as possible and make it as accurate as possible, especially if you can get a functioning badge and capture that and clone it. That's of course what we would encourage. But when you can't do that, just a simple, something that resembles it is pretty effective. So no key required. We do a lot of bypassing. Lock picking. We'll do lock picking sometimes, but I would not say that is something that we do. I wouldn't even say 50% of the time. I don't know. What would you say, Brent? Like, I don't know,
I
10,
think
20%.
Well, yeah. So there are times, obviously, where we do utilize lock picking, and I know that in the past, usually when we are sort of in a hurry or trying to obtain access, we take the path of least resistance. We do encounter locked doors, and sometimes we will see a quicker option that doesn't require us to pick the lock, so we'll go that route. But I think it really sort of depends on the approach that you take. But I know for us, we've had quite a few pretty successful engagements where we haven't even touched a lock at all. So
Yeah, I think the thing that has helped with lockpicking the most is, for me at least, is getting into like the fire escape area. Because during production hours, oftentimes they don't have those alarms active on the fire escape, but they also don't have. Sometimes they don't have like badge, like they may have some badge readers on there, but even with that, you can still oftentimes bypass that by picking the lock. There's also been times where I've picked the lock on a server room. They've had like two-factor authentication on there, like a biometric reader or a pin and badge, access control, and then you can bypass that just by picking a really poorly placed tumbler lock that is on there that they hadn't considered before, investing in some expensive electronic access control stuff.
yep.
This is a big bag up here at the top left of lock picks. we don't encourage you to carry this big old thing of lockpicks around with you and the Leatherman and all that stuff. It's handy to have, especially in your bag, depending on the scope of the assessment. But oftentimes we'll do something light. This is a picture of my cell phone case, and I've just got these small picks, some shims in there that I just keep in there. In addition to that, I'll have a diagnostics reader for RFID, like badge readers, that just to tell. So if I'm doing any kind of like reconnaissance and I want to know, is it a low frequency or high frequency badge reader, and then contact Brent and be like, hey man, flash that Proxmark to low frequency. It's easy to kind of do on the fly. Having something like a hall pass, which is a little card shaped shove knife that you can kind of keep in your wallet. There's a lot of different options like that.
Yeah, and so moving on to that, we've got one of the things that I like to put a lot of research and time into is taking these covert tools or these bypass tools and making them in such a way where I can conceal them, and even wearing normal street clothes, you can't tell that I've got a full set of bypass tools hidden on me. This is one tool that I've made. You can read more about it on wehackpeople.com. Basically, it gives a full breakdown. So on the bottom right, you can see these handful of tools. You've got these a few different master keys, some jigglers, Adams Wright bypass tools, some decoders, and so on. A few picks. All of those things could get pretty jumbled together in certain bags. So I was able to modify them through some machining techniques and add them to this key organizer, basically, where it's like a Swiss Army knife of bypass tools. You want to go to the next slide, Tim? Sure.
Yep.
And this is so weird doing these presentations where we aren't in person and having to go back and forth online, so it takes a bit of adjustment. Adding on to the covert part, this is a really cool thing from Billy Boatwright, social operator. This is something that he gave Tim and I a few DEF CONs ago. I thought it was super cool. Simple pen with, you can see the pick and the tensioner, which has been straightened out, just simply attached inside of the pen. It's very inconspicuous. I added a few rounds of gaffer tape on it, and I'll get into a bit more explanation on why I love gaffer tape.
So you don't always have to have like a laptop bag full of gear. We see some of these guys will have like a big old backpack for their red team engagement full of different tools that you're not going to use. Something light, I think, is advisable. This is one of the light covert kits that Brent and I both, use. This is actually Brent's stuff in the hotel that he kind of scattered around on the bed there. But having something like the GPD pocket laptop, I know a lot of people used to use like that Pwn tablet, the Nexus tablet with Ned Hunter on it and things like that. But the GPD, it's a pretty powerful laptop for the size of it. And it's really handy, especially when doing like wireless security assessments in addition to, and it kind of gives you an option to install a lot of tools that you weren't able to install on maybe a Nexus or something. For example, being able to flash your proxy on the fly or your Proxmark on the fly using that laptop, a lot of other things too. Having a logbook is always important. So when you get into the facility, I know sometimes your adrenaline's going. If any of you guys have ever done any kind of tests like this, I'm sure you'll agree with me. But one of the first things I do is go straight to the bathroom. When I go to the bathroom, I recompose myself, and using that logbook to make sure that I'm recording, not as I go, because of course that's conspicuous, but just kind of taking note of key moments. So I gained access to this area at this time, or something like that. That way, if the client wants to, they can go back and they can see if their camera coverage. So if you're not trying to avoid camera coverage, they can go back and they can confirm what happened, or look at the badge swipes and see, when a badge that you compromised was utilized and where, or something like that. So it's always handy for the client. I mentioned, kind of recomposing yourself. That's what that candy bar is there for. Brent started doing this a long time ago. He would carry that Milky Way on him, and then just to kind of get that your everything regulated and chilled out, because a lot of times, again, when your adrenaline's going, you're sweating and your heart's racing, and you find yourself in this moment of where your stressors are exacerbated. So that kind of helps you to relax a little bit. A lot of these other things on here you've probably seen, having a fake badge, USB devices, having something like a keylogger. And this, I think that's a rubber ducky, but having like a bash, any of the Hack 5 gadgets, like a land turtle, pineapple nano, the lock picks, and then of course latch slipping, which we'll get into in a moment. But those are a few of our favorite tools there. Oh, and you may ask, why are there cigarettes on there? Well, smoke breaks are still a thing. It may not always be cigarettes, it may be people vaping outside, but it happens, and there's been several times where we've taken advantage of that to either try to clone a badge, to just drive by, ask for directions, pretending we're lost, and then taking a picture or getting a good look at their badge, going back, duplicating that badge, and then coming back a couple of days later to getting access to the building. And that's just a closer look at that GPD micro laptop.
So, we've talked about picking locks, and sometimes you don't even need to do that. You don't even need to worry about the lock because it's not set properly. Or the lock, the keyway is fine, I'm sorry, but the latch is not set properly in the doorway. So as you can see here, this is my favorite attack. This has got me in more places than anything else. You can see how fast that attack is. So after one of the most secure places that I've been tasked to do an assessment against, the culture there was very security aware. They actually did things very well. One person would badge in, they would enter the door and turn around and close it and make sure it was closed before the next person badged in. That's not convenient, but it's ideal. Security is not always convenient, but in this particular case, I stood in the hallway that right outside of the elevator, waiting to go into the door. And it took me about 15 to 20 minutes. And I was actually on the phone with my wife the whole time, making myself appear busy so that someone was to be less likely to come and challenge me. So after a while, I saw the person walk in. I was watching people's body language. You could tell who was focused, who was paying attention. And then I was waiting for someone that seemed more shy, more less likely to question it if I were to tailgate, someone that just really didn't want to be bothered. So after about 15, 20 minutes, that person came along. As they badged in, they started to walk away and weren't paying attention to the door. And so I was able to grab it and then quickly walk in. From there, one of my favorite things to do is look for an open or guest cubicle. That's where I will sit down and unplug the phone line or plug directly into the network jack and begin the network assessment, trying to send shells out to the red team or whatever the task is. After about 2 hours of doing this, I'd gotten what I needed to do for the red team, so I got up and started walking around. Wasn't really familiar with the floors in this particular place, but it was one of those moments where it was such a freebie that it's hilarious. I was walking by, and on the door, I noticed a sign that says "Secret Comms Room." It was a black sign that said "Secret Comms Room." I was like, "Oh, that's cool." So the door was locked. I was able to slip that latch and go right in. Nobody was in there. You could see all of these blank cat cards that they would make for users. Inside of that room in the back was a red sign that said "Top Secret Comms Room." Tim, if you go back to the previous slide, you can see this Covert style lock It's a very, very secure lock. It's a great lock. They also had biometric fingerprint reader with card and PIN number. So, I mean, this door, they've spent a lot of money on it, but what they failed to do was set the latch properly. So I was able to slip that latch with a simple piece of plastic. This next slide, too, is a very similar attack with a shove knife.
Yeah, so I'm outside here, and what's funny about this too is that this particular client, they had a PTZ camera outside, and it's all scratched up on the dome. And come to find out later on when we were looking at their security system, they couldn't see anything because of the weather worn thing. So make sure that you're maintaining this kind of stuff. And then also for the just a note, for the sake of time, we may be flying through some of these slides. So fortunately, this is being recorded, so you'll be able to go back and look at it and push pause at your leisure.
Yeah, so here I am. This is after the attack. We're just doing a quick recording for the client, which, thankfully to them, they allowed us to share this. So that's another thing. Get approval from clients before you start sharing videos and stuff like this and talks. You can see the latch there. You can quickly see that shove knife go in between there and pop it open. Super
My
quick.
fancy man bun there.
And just to add to that too, Shrum tool, these are also great for latch slipping. They sort of give you a bit more oomph whenever you need to retract the latch. They're great tools. There's a few different sizes. I recommend having both sizes for different variations. If you've done these physical assessments before, you're aware of what I'm talking about. Here's another version. So this is, you can see in front of the where the latch is, you can see the latch guard, the latch guard there. So basically, that's trying to block the attack from the piece of plastic. So with this tool, I'm basically just bypassing that latch guard altogether and going straight over top of it, slipping the latch and opening the door. Tim, will you play that one more time, please? It's so quick that that's one of the reasons it's great. So here we are going over the latch guard. There we go. Super easy.
Or you could just use a coat hanger.
Yep. We'll do the same thing. It'll take a bit more work. You have to finesse it a little bit. It's not as simple, but it will work. And we talked about the latch not being set properly. So the security pin needs to be pressed. If the security pin and the latch are both going inside the strike plate, then that means the security pin is not set. So make sure whoever is installing these locks, whether it's maintenance or a locksmith, make sure they know what they're doing. Otherwise, it doesn't matter if you have a $10 lock or a $300 lock.
Okay, so this is the under the door tool. You've probably heard of it, but in this video, I'm using it at my hotel. A lot of people may not consider this, but all hotels are pretty much vulnerable to this, and a lot of buildings that we do assessments for. So the tool just goes under the door, you grab the latch, and then you're just able to open it from the other side, bypassing any kind of access control. A way to prevent this simply is by rolling up a piece like a towel or something like that and shoving it in there. There's other things you can get to that are, of course, not like a towel, but if you're staying at a hotel and you just want to, if you're paranoid, it's a handy tip. So this is a thumb turner tool. You can just slide it. If there's a big enough gap, you can slide it in there and you just turn the handle and it just turns that knob from the inside, essentially doing the similar thing as the under the door tool, and then also this tool that Brent will be demonstrating in the crash bar tool on the next slide.
Yeah, so as you can see the physical gap between the doors. Through the glass, you can see the crash bar. So basically, I just take this, I insert it into the gap, I turn it in a way where it's going to press in on the crash bar just as if you were on the other side trying to exit. And obviously, a quick way to mitigate that is to close that physical gap with an astragal, a security astragal, one that can't be manipulated easily. So Or you can make your own. This is one that I made from some wire that you can find pretty easily in campaign signs, and basically just bend it in a way. And I put some heat shrink on the ends to prevent scratching. It's a lot smaller profile than the one that you saw in the previous video, and it's just as successful.
So request active sensors, you've probably seen some of our videos floating around like Twitter or YouTube. But we often bypass this with canned air. There's a few different ways you can do this. A lot of these sensors are based off of both motion and temperature. So that temperature fluctuation can go, cold or hot. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a heat sensor. And what happens is a lot of times people will place these way too close to the door. If you look at that top, or if it's improperly configured, and you're able to trip that with some kind of motion, then you can open the door from the outside. And that's exactly what we do here. At the beginning here, you'll see Brent is doing something prior to us bypassing this request for access sensor, just to kind of keep access. So let me push play here.
Yeah, so this is just a really quick, like, hey, let me grab these items off my desk, so that we can keep going in and out. Obviously, this is not ideal. As you can see, it's pretty sloppy, but it works. It weakens the mag lock enough where, so wait a few seconds here, the door has reset, it's locked. Just come over and pull it open, as though it's not locked at all.
So what this does is if you've got any kind of monitoring system, it will still show that door is shut. It won't show that it's ajar. So, sticking something like there that will keep the door open. Instead, it's still got that connectivity to at least trick the sensor into believing that it is shut. And here is the canned air trick I was talking about. So show that the door is locked, use the canned air, and the bitterments from that canned air, when you turn it upside down, will raise, and then it just tricks that sensor. This, we point out that there is a two-factor authentication. So there's a fingerprint reader and then a badge reader as well. The door is locked. Pro tip, carry 2 straws with you. Don't always just carry one. So in this, the straw did pop off, and then I go and I do it again as Brent's recording me. But yeah, again, those bitterments, it turns cold. Also, watch your hands. You can get a chemical burn if you're not careful when using compressed air like that. So when you do turn it down, it does get very cold. And so just be mindful of that.
Yeah, and don't try it too much, especially in a confined office space, because it will linger and everyone will have this awful taste in their mouth. This is a similar attack. We can just show this real quick, but basically that is a hand warmer going through, tripping the request for exit sensor on the other side. As Tim mentioned, you've got your 2 factors, your motion and your temperature variance. Same thing here. And then, as I mentioned earlier, all those attacks that where we put anything through the door, a security astrogol is a super quick, easy way to fix that.
So Brent showed in that video earlier, another way you can do that. Brent mentioned gaffer tape earlier too. Gaffer tape, if you just put a couple layers on there, it's just as effective and it blends in a lot more than using a paperclip.
Yeah, so for door checks, the paperclip makes it way too weak, so security guard or whoever is going to know, okay, this door is clearly not locked. The gaffer tape requires a pretty good pull on it to open it.
So the number one way we get into these buildings isn't by bypassing stuff or anything like that. It's simply by tailgating and pretending we're supposed to be there. So, tailgating is still it's still like one of the number one attack vectors, I think, for covert entry.
Yeah, people are super nice. So we're going to actually be releasing a video on this. We're painting pin pads and picking up on people's pin numbers. And so we can go past that because I know we're getting low on time.
We mentioned some key-to-like systems. These are some common keys that you can use to get access to control panels, cabinet keys, a lot of different things like that. Our buddy Deviant Olem has a pretty comprehensive list of these keys. It's pretty awesome. So that's a few. Service elevators, they're amazing. Oftentimes they don't, if there's a badge restricted access for an elevator in a lobby or something, try to get to the back and look for a service elevator. Oftentimes they do not have badge access and it's less populated. So shimming,
yeah, that's Tim shimming. Go ahead, Tim. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. So, a lot of combination locks, for example, people are like, how do you get past combination locks? Same thing. Using a shim, you can make shims yourself or you can buy them. A lot of lockpick vendors sell them. Just sliding it in there. I use it on both.
Yeah, there's a lot of people videos too where you can make these out of by cutting aluminum cans.
Yep. So pretty quick, pretty easy. A lot of those master locks that are shown there are super easy to bypass, either by shimming or like a quick stick or just simply picking some.
All of these locks that you see there are the locks that we give to people when we're teaching them how to pick locks, if that tells you anything. So fix it with a better lock.
This is just a bonus real quick. There's something called a rogue ring. I'm using one hand just because I was recording it, but it's got a shim in it. Same principle. When will you do this? Probably not going to do it when you're on a client side if you get arrested or something like that, but it is a handy skill to know. Criminals do know this. And you can get this ring. There's a lot of different versions of this ring, but I believe Scam School has a pretty cool version. You just slide it in between the teeth, bypass that double lock, and then get free of the handcuffs.
Yep, hinge pin removal. If you see an external door with the hinge pins that are externally facing, and you're going to be risky, just take it off the hinges.
Yep. No tech badge emulation. Again, we mentioned you can just kind of forge a badge. There's a lot of different things out there. Here's a few of the common low frequency and high frequency badges, badge readers. Utilizing something like the Proxmark, the new Proxmark RDV4 there on the right, on the left. Those are the two that Brent and I have been using for years, either the Proxmark Easy or just the regular old Proxmark with the battery in it. But easily concealable.
Yeah, they're great. You can hide these things anywhere. Clipboard. Tim, I think there's a video. Yep, there it is, right there.
So in this video, there's actually an Arduino. I've got the Proxmark in there too, but there's an Arduino that is running, and it's got a NIC on it that you can connect to, so that someone can actively see badges that you steal, and outside of just doing replay attacks.
Nice. Yeah, we hide these in all sorts of things. Prime example.
Which I wish
more stories on that we were unfortunately out of time to share. But we do have that on a few other talks inside of the badge cloner. A NIC on that as well. This is another video of a cloned badge being replayed. Tim, this was one you cloned off of a security guard, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was talking to the security guard, and I literally bumped his chest with my hand, and he didn't even notice as I on that.
Their devices, you can place bugs, basically tap the HIB reader and access that. You can see it here.
We recommend the ESP key. It's pretty awesome. It has a Wi-Fi enabled, so you're able to replay attacks and stuff or badge swipes and things from your phone. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, USB attacks. That's pretty well-known thing. So we won't get into that too much again because of time constraints, unfortunately. But if you have things that are wide open like this, where anybody can just walk in and plug in something, that's obviously super bad. There's several USB-based tools, such as what's listed here.
Yeah, a lot of times I'll use the keylogger and just say that I'm doing a network or a network test, speed test, or something like that, and have people, hey, can you lock your system? Then I'll plug it in. Be like, hey, can I get you to log back in real quick? And then bam, you've got their domain credentials.
Yeah. So let's. I think we're pretty much out of time at this point. I know we've got a few things we've sort of mentioned uh, pretty quick. So yeah, just common things to look for: shredder bins, unlocked machines, uh, ways to basically help us get in. And so these are all obviously quick things to look for.
Social engineering, make sure that things you can do, clean desktop policy, I mentioned that, lock your stuff, have minimum baseline configurations. Make sure you're not just doing a security awareness training every year, but it's a security culture, and make sure it's ingrained in your people. It shouldn't just be like, oh, okay, well, I did my online test and quiz, so I scored a 80%. I'm good to go for the rest of the year. It doesn't matter how great your electronic access controls are or your physical access controls, if you can just walk in or if it's placed in something that's with a poor locking core or something like that.
Yep, that's sorry we had to sort of speed through the end there.